1998. One Korean company employed 320,000 people across 100 countries. 1 year later, it was gone. This is the story of the boy who built it and the decision that destroyed it.
Welcome to Korean Power Network, documentary explorations of Korean industry, power, and ambition. This man spent 6 years running, 6 years moving between China, Vietnam, Britain, France, chain smoking in borrowed apartments, giving interviews to foreign journalists who found him in loose trousers and bare feet. While back home, the workers who had given him their careers stood outside the gates of his factories holding printed posters with his face on them. Wanted, Kim Woo-choong, chairman, fugitive. The man on those posters had once been one of the most admired people in South Korea. His face on the cover of business magazines, his autobiography a national bestseller, young people carrying his words the way other generations carried scripture. He had borrowed $10,000. He had built a company with 320,000 employees, operating in 100 countries, ranked 18th in the world. Then he destroyed it and left the bill, $50 billion, for a country that had trusted him to carry it. But the story of how Daewoo rose and fell does not begin in a boardroom. It does not begin in 1999 when the walls came down. It begins with a boy, a school teacher's son, in a city at war, who learned before he was old enough to shave that nothing in this world would wait for him. December 19th, 1936. Daegu, South Korea, the city where Samsung was born, and the city that produced the man who would build Samsung's greatest rival. Kim Woo-choong grew up the son of a school teacher who had climbed further than most men of his generation, provincial governor of North Gyeongsang province, a man with standing, with connections, with a future worth planning around. Then the Korean War arrived, and one morning, soldiers came to the family home. They took his father north, across a border that would never open again. Kim Woo-choong was a teenager. His father was gone. He never learned what happened to him. Kim sold newspapers. He sold goods on the street. He fed his family through the worst years of the war with the earnings of a child doing the work of an adult. When the fighting stopped and Korea began its long reconstruction, he rebuilt his education alongside the country, graduating from Kyunghee High School, then Yonsei University in 1960 with a degree in economics. He came out of university not with connections or capital, but with something that proved more durable than either, an understanding earned before adulthood that nothing holds still, that the only response to an unstable world is relentless forward motion. In 1967, Kim was 30 years old, working as a trade buyer for a small company, watching President Park Chung-hee's government pump credit into industries that would export Korea's way to prosperity. He watched the model work. He made a decision. He found 5 partners. He borrowed $10,000, every cent of it, and on March 22nd, 1967, he registered a small textiles trading company out of a single rented room. He named it Daewoo, Great Universe. For a man with 10,000 borrowed dollars and 5 partners crammed into one room, naming your company the Great Universe is either delusion or prophecy. In Kim Woo-choong's case, for 30 years, it turned out to be prophecy. Within 5 years, the company had recorded $1 million in annual exports. Kim had gone where other Korean businessmen wouldn't go: Sudan, Libya, Pakistan, the oil-flush Middle East of the 1970s, and planted Daewoo in markets that had never heard a Korean pitch before. He was fluent in English where most of his competitors weren't. He worked 18-hour days when most of them went home at 6. He slept at his factories the night before major production deadlines. He did not play golf, and he did not drink. He did not take holidays. Work for Kim Woo-choong was not what you did between weekends. It was the only thing. Through the 1980s, while other Korean chaebols were being careful, Kim was buying. Struggling state-owned companies the government needed off its balance sheet. Kim took them. Debt-heavy manufacturers in sectors nobody else wanted. Kim acquired them. Then he fixed them. He was going to countries that frightened other investors. Sudan, Libya, Pakistan, Eastern Europe when the Soviet bloc began crumbling. Kim saw not political risk, but market vacancy. Places with enormous need and no one yet supplying it. His personal motto became famous. If we don't have technology, we can buy it. If we don't have money, we can borrow it and repay it when we make a profit. By the mid-1990s, Daewoo had over 3,500 products, trading in 130 countries. A shipyard, an automobile division, a construction arm building infrastructure across the developing world, and a hotel in Hanoi that Kim's wife personally furnished with porcelain and fine art and opened with 3,000 guests, one of whom was Vladimir Putin. In 1989, Kim published his autobiography. He called it, "Every Street is Paved with Gold." Young graduates read it on subway trains. Entrepreneurs quoted it. Kim was not merely a businessman, he was a mirror that Korea held up to see what it had become capable of. In 1998, Fortune magazine ranked Daewoo 18th on its Global 500 list. 320,000 employees, 76.7 trillion Korean won in assets. The $10,000 loan had become something that defied its own origin story. What that Fortune list did not show, what the audited accounts did not show, was the number underneath the number. $50 billion in debt, hidden. Concealed inside accounting structures so complex that the banks lending Daewoo money did not know the full picture. The auditors knew, the senior executives knew, and Kim Woo-choong knew. He kept building anyway. July 1997. A currency collapse in Thailand sent a shock through every economy in Asia. Within months, it had consumed South Korea. The won dropped nearly 50%. Interest rates rose to 30%. The credit lines that had financed Korea's economic miracle became impossible to service overnight. South Korea went to the IMF. $58 billion, the largest bailout in IMF history at that point. President Kim Dae-jung took office with one mandate: break the arrangement between the government and the chaebols. Samsung complied, Hyundai complied, LG complied. Kim Woo-choong did not comply. He accelerated. In 1998, the single year when every analyst, every creditor, every economist was saying, reduce, Kim Woo-choong acquired 14 new companies. He increased Daewoo's total debt by 40% in 12 months. And he was not restructuring, he was doubling down. His logic, stripped to its core, was two things. He believed Daewoo's emerging market revenues would outrun the debt. And he believed, with a certainty that proved fatal, that the government would never let Daewoo fail. 320,000 jobs, 100 countries. The state had always stepped in. He had spent his entire career inside a system built on that assumption. Daewoo needed $500 million every single month just to service the interest on its borrowings. Korea's entire government budget for 1999 was 84 trillion won. Daewoo's debt exceeded it. President Kim Dae-jung had promised the IMF and the Korean public that the era of the unconditional chaebol rescue was finished. For the first time in the history of the arrangement between Korean governments and Korean conglomerates, a president chose to let the company fall. On November 1st, 1999, Daewoo was declared bankrupt. 12 subsidiaries collapsed under creditor control on the same day. The great universe, 320,000 employees, 130 countries, 32 years of compound ambition, collapsed in a single season. Kim Woo-choong was already gone. December 1999. While prosecutors in Seoul were assembling the largest fraud case in Korean corporate history, Kim Woo-choong was on a plane to China, then Vietnam, then Britain, then France, where he eventually obtained temporary residency and disappeared into a life that bore no resemblance to the one he had built. A frail man in loose trousers, chain-smoking in a quiet apartment, waiting. Back in Korea, what he had left behind was being dismantled at speed. 40 executives charged, 7 imprisoned by 2001. Investigators peeling back layer after layer of Daewoo's accounting to reveal what auditors had spent years concealing. Liabilities buried in subsidiary structures, losses disguised as assets, a 41 trillion won fraud that had kept the company's books looking healthy while the actual position was terminal. The Korean government spent $36 billion of public money, ordinary citizens' taxes, stabilizing the wreckage. Daewoo Motors was eventually sold to General Motors. The shipbuilding arm became one of the world's most capable independent yards. The workers with the handmade wanted posters outside the factory gates were not performing for cameras. They were issuing the most human verdict possible on a man who had asked for their loyalty and spent it on a gamble he lost. Interpol issued a notice. Fraud of 41 trillion won. Illegal borrowing of 9.8 trillion won. 3.2 billion US dollars alleged to have been smuggled out of the country before he left. He stayed away for 6 years. Six years after he left, Kim Woo-choong came back. He walked through arrivals at Incheon Airport on June 14th, 2005, and was arrested before he reached the car park. He faced the cameras. He bowed. He told reporters, "I am sorry for hurting the nation. I am ready to accept whatever the authorities have in store for me." The trial ran almost a year. On its final day, Kim Woo-choong stood in the courtroom and made one last statement. He said, and this is a direct quote, "I cannot dodge my responsibility of wrongly buttoning up the final button of fate." Not the language of a man who planned to steal, the language of a man who genuinely believed he was building something permanent, and made the irreversible mistake of refusing to acknowledge the moment it stopped being true. In May 2006, he was sentenced to 10 years and ordered to repay $22 billion. In 2007, President Roh Moo-hyun pardoned him. Less than 2 years served. Kim Woo-choong died on December 9, 2019. He was 82 years old. In his final years, he occasionally argued that the company could have survived with different conditions. That debate has never been settled. What is settled is what he left behind and what it cost. Every street is paved with gold. He wrote that at the top of the world. He died with a $22 billion court order against his name and a country that had largely moved on without him. The Daewoo building still stands in Seoul. The Hanoi Hotel still receives guests. Daewoo appliances still sit in homes in Nigeria and Poland and Ukraine, outlasting by decades the empire that shipped them. What is gone is the idea, the great universe, the belief that a company with enough ambition and enough movement could outrun any wall. He was wrong about the wall, but he was right about almost everything else for 30 years. And that 30 years of being right was precisely what made the final wrong so catastrophic. For the company, for the workers, and for the country that paid the cleanup bill. Korea learned something permanent from Daewoo's fall. The state would no longer guarantee the survival of companies that grew too large to govern themselves. That change saved Samsung. That change saved Hyundai. And Daewoo's collapse was the warning that made every other chaebol's survival possible. A school teacher's son from Daegu borrowed $10,000. He built the 18th largest company on Earth. He refused to stop when stopping was the only rational choice. And he left behind a lesson that South Korean business has not forgotten in 25 years. Know when to button the last button.